We'll go ahead and begin, George. I'm sure Vince will join us shortly.
Yep.
Greg, would you mind just texting Vince to make sure he is on his way?
Yes, we'll do.
Thank you. All right. Well, I will call to order the Monday, October 26, 2020 Town of Essex Select Board meeting.
And I will call to order the Essex Junction Trustees meeting.
Thank you, George. Are there any agenda additions or changes? Evan or Greg?
No changes. There are some minor changes that Lieutenant Kissinger has for the traffic ordinance, but he can walk you through those when we get to that point.
Are these additional documents, or do we have to not worry about changing the agenda?
Yeah, no need to change the agenda.
Okay. Select board members, do you wish to take anything out of, oh, excuse me, we don't have a consent agenda, so I guess we don't have to take anything out of it. So the agenda is good to go.
Anybody? Additions or changes? Good.
Okay.
Sorry,
All
I couldn't. I apologize. 1,000 apologies. This is my Mac. I have a trackpad issue. I didn't know if, I know it's not village trustee time, but I was going to suggest we move the last item, local option tax, up and move the 2 select board only agenda items down. Thinking that select board could finish up the meeting on their last 2 items if they're select board only, and the village trustees would potentially adjourn 2 meetings in a row.
Can I jump in on that, Raj?
Pardon?
If I can just explain that a little bit. Does the select board only? The select board only is for action, but it's still applicable to the trustees in terms of seeing what's going on with traffic, and eventually the trustees are going to be asked to approve the traffic ordinance as well, just because of the differences between the approval process between the 2 boards. The select board has to take action first and then the trustees afterwards, but you're still being asked to look at the same items.
That makes complete and total sense, Greg. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Andy?
One suggestion maybe is to move the out and about update above the local option tax one, since I need to recuse myself for the local option one. And if I leave, then I won't have to come back if it's the last agenda item.
Mm-hmm.
That's only convenience for me, and it's so I don't please. It's trivial.
Excuse me. I have no objection to that if the rest of the board members do not.
Yeah, I don't have an objection to that, Andy. That's fine.
So we'll move item 5E to come after item 5C. Any other agenda amendments? Andy, is your hand still up or is that new?
Oh, sorry, that's a residual.
Okay, thanks. Okay, seeing no other agenda changes requested or no hands up, Select Board, would you like to move to approve the amended agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Pat.
Second.
Thank you, Dawn. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Same motion for the trustees. Do I hear a motion to amend the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Sorry, excuse me. Who moved that? I
Raj.
did-
It was Raj.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
There you go. Thank you.
Let's move on to public to be heard. This is the part of the meeting when, if you are in the audience, you wish to speak to the board about items that are not on the agenda. If anyone in the audience would like to speak to the board, you can either raise your hand using your toolbar in the upper right or in the center of your screen, or you can indicate you wish to speak by using the chat. If you'd wish to speak to the board on something that is not on the agenda, please indicate that now. Thank you. Okay. I am not seeing any hands. I'm not seeing any chat. Yep. There we go. Betsy Dunn.
Thank you. This is just a comment, not a question. But last week when George was talking about the town outside of the village, and saying that we were going to have to accept a new culture when the merger goes through, I found that very interesting in that the merger of the two fire departments can't happen because there's a culture difference. I don't understand that at all. Thank you.
Thanks, Betsy. Anyone else with comments on items that are not on the agenda? All right, go ahead, George, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I want to just respond to Betsy. Betsy, I wasn't saying the select board is going to have to accept a new culture. I think, and if that's the impression I gave, then that's my fault for not being clear. I just said I think we have some different ways of doing things, and merger is going to require us to sort of be collaborative and open to each other's way of doing things and understanding. And that really, I didn't mean to be threatening at all that we were going to try to come and change the board's culture, but we do have some differences in how we approach development and other things in the village. I was really just trying to make that point. Thanks.
But I don't understand why that doesn't apply to the fire stations so that they could join and merge.
Well, it could probably apply. It probably applies to everything. I don't want to intrude. I won't keep talking, but I think it probably applies to probably most village and town departments, if I'm understanding. There's probably, because we've been separated for so long, there's probably cultural differences between the two. And if we merge them, there's going to be a period of integration where we're going to have to learn and understand each other's way of doing things. That's all.
That would be good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to business item 5A. Approve Town of Essex, Village of Essex Junction Public Works Winter Operations Plan with COVID-19 impacts 2020 to 2021.
Dennis,
I'm
you're
guessing
up.
this is Dennis.
Thank you, and good evening. You've got the information in front of you, and it has been posted on the webpage as a draft. The recommendation or request is that you approve the document tonight. As you can tell from reading the cover memo, and if you look through the plan, there's a couple things. It hasn't changed hardly at all from last year. That was on purpose. We had planned to make some changes this year in some areas. The problem that we've got basically is personnel and COVID. And if you haven't guessed from reading the memo and other things that are going on, there's a great deal of angst on the part of public works departments. We've been talking to our neighbors in the county. We all share the same concerns. You know, we understand the situation with doctors and nurses and police officers and can appreciate their particular situation. We've been lucky this summer. We've been able to carry on and do our jobs, and we're kind of in the background. From here on out until whenever winter ends, we're going to be in the foreground because none of the emergency responders can get to their jobs. None of the businesses can stay open. None of the schools can stay open unless we keep the roads open. And that's the concern that we have. We don't have a large workforce. We don't have a workforce in depth. You cannot find plow operators now that are experienced with a CDL. I just noticed in the paper, there's another action on the papers on the webpage today from the state. There's a couple more communities in the area just looking, small communities, looking for someone who can drive a plow truck and has a CDL. They're just not out there. It's a skill set that's hard to get. It takes years of experience. It's part art, part science. If some of you have been in the trucks, you know what I mean in terms of operating the wing, the plow, the amount of salt or sand that's going down, watching for the car coming at you, watching for the mailboxes, watching for the kids that are playing in adjacent, waiting for school or whatever else. So it's a tough business, and it's about to get tougher. In the past, we've had employees who've come in and plowed when they're sick. We can't really do that. We can't run the risk of a whole crew going out.
Nope.
And so that's our concern. And our concern is we've got to find a couple things. One, we're working with our neighboring communities to develop lists where we could possibly share equipment and resources. That's really tough because there's the big snowstorm. Everybody wants the snow removed at once, and there's no problem a couple days later. The problem comes when it's that 8 to 10 inch snowfall that occurs, and it's occurring everywhere, and everybody needs people at the same time. We're trying to work our way through that, but I'm telling you, it's not going to be easy. I'm not looking forward to this winter. It's going to be hopefully we get decent weather. The best thing that we could probably have is heavy snow and no ice, and that makes our job a whole lot easier. We do have some temps that we're going to use, but they don't have CDLs and can't plow the big trucks. So we didn't go and expand our sidewalk plowing services. I did think it was interesting. Evan had asked this question. I was a little late getting back to him, but and I had Shannon do up some things from the GIS base. The town has about 53.6 miles of concrete or paved sidewalks. We actually plow 48 miles of those, which surprised me because I had never gone back and took a look at them. But a lot of the walks we plow are the long walks, not short streets with developments. Those we don't get into very much. But it's 48.2 out of 53.6 is a substantial amount that we do plow. So right now we've got the equipment. We do have the equipment. The one truck we ordered that was a replacement truck for this year, we ordered in March. We'll be seeing it in February. So we're using one of our older trucks this winter to get through the winter. If it breaks, we're going to have to repair it, and we're planning to turn it in February. That gives you an indication what's going on in the industry. The trucks, order them in March, get them the following February. That's the way it is. So I'm not painting a pretty picture, and I don't intend to paint a pretty picture. We're going to do our job, do it to the best of our ability. One of the things we came up with, and you've got it in a document in front of you, is to try to come up with some way to let the public and the schools and everybody know what's going on. And that's to come up with some form of a system, and we've chosen, or I've chosen for the good, bad, or indifferent, green, yellow, red. Green being, hey, we're doing everything we can. It'll be just like it's shown in the winter operations plan. We'll get to it right away. We'll get it cleared off. Yellow, we're probably talking some delays. Could be 4 hours, could be 6 hours in terms of clearing all our routes. Obviously, we're going to do the high priority routes. If we have emergencies, we'll try to get those and get those done. But that's could be 4 to 8 hours where we're late. We can deal with that. We can put other people on trucks, throw some of the pickup trucks on the roads that other people can drive. We'll do everything we can. The red phase is a different animal. The red phase is when we have maybe a person or two down with COVID, or maybe more, and we can't get the crews out and keep them running. And if that's the case, we're going to be late. You may see the main roads done, and some of the secondary roads may not be done till the next day. And I don't even want to think about that, but you've got to identify ahead of time a worst case. That to me is the worst case. And I think everybody in the county is thinking about how do we handle this worst case if and when it occurs. So I'm going to keep quiet with that. That's what we've said in there. We're going to try to do as good a job we can as publicizing this through the media. If the board approves the plan, obviously the first route for sharing of equipment is between the town and the village. And, if the village it has a truck down and needs our help, we're going to help them. If we have a truck down, they're going to help us. We do have some problems because some of our trucks are equipped only for the gravel roads, and the village trucks, they're equipped for salt, and they're not going to do much good putting gravel out the back of us at the end of a salt truck. They're just not equipped to do that. And by the time you shift it over, the storm's done. So there are some realities we're going to have to deal with. But I thought I'd, paint the picture as it is, and hopefully that you'll go ahead and approve the plan, and we'll try to execute it and in some way, shape, or form get through the winter. I'm hoping that somewhere along the line, someone at the state realizes that plow truck operators in this state, at least for this winter, are emergency personnel. And if we do get a vaccine and get other things, some of those people should go to the top of the list, because other people aren't going to move if those trucks don't move. And I'll keep quiet after that and answer any questions you have.
I think I saw Evan has his hand up and Pat Murray has his hand up, and I'm not sure who was first.
I'll wait.
Oh, okay, Pat?
You want to hear what I have to say, Evan?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks. Appreciate the update, and I appreciate the focus on getting the plan out there. I think that's really going to be key. I think it's relevant to share, Dennis, your experience with CDL drivers, and the complete lack of getting them is not just a local issue, but is in fact a nationwide issue. The schools have dealt with this before with busing and trying to get bus drivers to the point where they were doing a training, they were offering a $2,000 sign-on bonus, and they still weren't pulling in the drivers that were needed. I think something that very frequently happens, or at least anecdotally that I can share, is people come to me and they say, well, just hire some more. But it just doesn't work like that. We can put as much money in the budget as we want, but just hire more is literally not an option. So, having the ability to say, we've looked at this, we have realistic expectations going into this. I think people understand we're in a pandemic. They understand that if we get down, that's, where it's going to be. We're all Vermonters. We're used to dealing with the snow and the hassle of that. But I think as long as it's out there, as long as it's shared, like you say you're going to do, and people are aware of that fact, then I think that you guys are on a really good path going forward. Otherwise, I think that that's really where we would get the problems if that reach doesn't spread enough, and people are calling in the day of, and they get 24 hours before my side street gets plowed. Just so I guess whatever we can do to help from the select board level, certainly. If there's any assistance or any sort of information that we can share and propagate, certainly willing to help as far as that goes.
Thank you, Pat. Evan, did you want to go?
Sure. Now that I see that other hands have not gone up. So Dennis, maybe you can explain a little bit about what goes in briefly, like about routes. Like I have people who tell me, well, anybody could jump in a truck and do a route. Anybody ever drive one of those trucks down Susie Wilson with somebody passing you at 35 miles per hour when you're driving a 10-ton truck loaded with salt? Talk to a little bit about that. What happens when your regular driver isn't available for his or her route?
Yeah, we've planned for some of those things already. There's not a lot in our back pocket, but we do have a couple people that we can pull in to help us. The superintendent right now is not part of the rotation, but he came from the rotation, so he can go in and fill in. So obviously, if one person's out, he can come in, fill in. We're good to go. We also can adjust routes. I mean, we've got a map that we produce. The map is on the webpage. It's going to stay there. The routes generally take 4 to 5 hours in a normal snowstorm, 4 to 5 hours to plow. But it's, as I said, it's a skill and an art. And we've had accidents before with these trucks, and they're not pretty because they're heavy and they're hard to stop. And you cannot put someone who's inexperienced. And it generally takes somewhere between 3 to 5 years from the time we hire a young person to the point where we're comfortable saying you can go out on your own and plow safely. And we've got a lot of those. Most of our employees are in that category. And we're going to do a lot. We're not going to allow people to congregate in the garage, which is, we talked about that this morning. Somebody comes in at 5 or 3 o'clock in the morning. They've been plowing. Maybe they've been plowing through the night before, and they come back in after a couple hours of sleep. And then we have a break in the storm. And then all of a sudden it shows up again in the afternoon. I can't have them hanging around the garage. So you may see the trucks on the road more, just out driving and cleaning up, which is kind of a waste of resources. But I can't have 6 or 8 guys hanging in the garage with masks on, waiting for that storm to switch over. They can't eat together. I'm not going to allow them to eat in the lunchroom together. It's too small a room with 10 or 12 people in there at one time. We may have to go to some shifts. We may have to put the road grader on the road. We may have to use the bucket loader. So we've got some contingency plans to make up where there's holes. My concern is if we get to the point where things just really start to fall apart and there isn't, and it's really a COVID situation. The other thing, a lot of people will come in the past have come in with colds, with a temperature. Do they have the flu, or do they have COVID or a head cold? So we'll test them. We'll have them go get a test. If they're going to get a test and you have to wait for that test, you probably lost them for 48 hours minimum. So now you're waiting for another operator who's not on a truck for 48 hours just because they came in and had a temperature. And you've got to, because if you don't do that, then we lose all 9 operators and then we really are in trouble. So we're trying to work through all the different plans we can to make it work. And I don't know if I've explained it well, but
yeah, I think you did.
It's going to be tough.
Thank you, Dennis.
I think Amber had her hand up. Amber?
Hey, Dennis. I had a question regarding, it's more, I guess, towards the school district, but I don't know if you've had a discussion with the school district about how their notification process is going to work, because I know you mentioned in the plan that they're going to be responsible for letting folks know if we're in a red state. Have you had any discussion with the school district about that?
Yes, we have. The problem is always going to be timing. If it happens suddenly, we're all in trouble. And what do we do at that point? And then we'll have to try to get buses wherever they have to go. But if the timing is appropriate, we have always, the position has always been, we don't call the shots on businesses being open or closed, open or closed. That's up to the schools to decide. All we can do is give them the information as soon as we know it so they can then adjust. We've given them copies of the plan, gave it to them actually about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And part of what we're going to be doing after tonight's meeting is meeting with everybody again, meeting with the police, because if there's an emergency, they need to know they can still call on us. If someone's having a health situation, a crisis, we may have to just drop a route and go try to get them out. I mean, that's the bottom line. School buses, we've always tried, if a school bus got stuck, to try to get to them. We'll still continue to do that. So we have to keep that line. I think the important thing, and you mentioned, is to keep that line of communication open with everybody so that it's real clear that as soon as we know we're getting into a problem, they know, and then they can adjust. I think the school, from what I've talked to them a little bit so far, is, they're getting pretty good at distance learning. I don't think anybody likes that. They'd much rather have kids in the classroom. But I think they can react pretty quickly if for some reason the school is closed. And it's closed relatively quickly. They have an excellent notification system through it to parents. And our job is to get that information to them as soon as we can so that they can make the right decision. Usually every winter, and most people don't even realize this, is Dan, our highway foreman, is on the phone with someone at the school probably almost on a daily basis as to what's going on, what's happening, what's likely to happen. And I think Ricky does the same thing in the village. So we try to keep those lines open. Not perfect, we blow some, but most of the time we're pretty good with that.
Thanks, Dennis.
I don't know if I had a couple of comments or questions, but I don't want to cut anyone else off. Does anyone else have a question at this point? Any selectmen or trustees? Elaine?
Dennis, for what it's worth, is it helpful if we try to communicate with residents now before the snow flies to say two things? Be aware that we may have shortages related to COVID, but also, if you can, shovel your walk. Is that helpful?
That would be helpful. We're going to run our routes anyway, and so I'm not sure. I can't have them shoveling the streets, which is probably what we need. But yeah, I mean, if we had, for example, if we knew that a particular neighborhood ahead of time was going to come in and say, hey, for this winter, we'll take care of our walks. And I know that some of the developments have already done that in the town. That means we don't have to send up a piece of equipment there. And that would be helpful if we knew early. But if we're going to do that, we need, I don't expect they'd be doing Susie Wilson Road or doing Route 15. But as we go into some of these other areas where we've, get into some of the developments, if they can clear them themselves and let us know, that would again cut down on the people we have to send out. My biggest concern, and I don't want to interrupt, is the sidewalk plows don't take a lot of time to train people on. We're going to have a couple kids coming back. College kids are coming back early that we're going to use during the winter. We've got some people that have done it before, some temporary help. Almost anybody can hop on a sidewalk plow. Almost anybody. I mean, not everybody. So the sidewalks aren't the concern. The concern is really having the qualified CDL drivers on the big trucks. That's the real concern, because we just can't replace them. You can find people to do the sidewalk plows.
Raj, yes, Raj, go ahead.
I think some of the questions got duplicated. It's all good. I'm answered.
You good?
Good.
Dennis, if I could make one or two comments, I would suggest that we put a lot of emphasis for both village and town staff to get their flu shots, if you can, because if they get sick and you haven't had a flu shot, if you get sick and you have had a flu shot, chances are it's not the flu, or you've got COVID. So that would be something I just personally would suggest. And then I'm also wondering, you talk about they're gathering together, and I know in the village, and I'm guessing it's probably true in the town, they kind of have team or group meetings to talk about, going for, work and so forth. And if someone gets tested after you've had one of those group meetings, you're going to have to quarantine everybody who was at the meeting potentially. So you could wind up taking the whole crew out. And I'm wondering if, in anticipation of reducing that temptation to meet as a group, it might be worth it to make sure that they can somehow set them up so that they can communicate online if necessary, so that they don't have to get together as a group. Just two thoughts. If it means a little bit of an investment, it's certainly worth it in terms of saving the stress of what would happen if you have to take out a whole crew.
Yeah, I've got a meeting set up. I know Ricky's got one planned also. We've got a meeting set up with the town group on Wednesday morning on the plan, and trying to figure out ways to keep everybody safe, because some of our employees have family members that have reduced immune systems. So we have to be careful about that as well. They have gone through and a lot of the employees have taken the flu shots.
Oh, good. Okay.
I can't force them to, that's a personal decision. No. All I can do is talk to them. And again, we'll have that talk on Wednesday. Most have had it, a few haven't. So I'm going to try to convince those others that it's a good idea to go get it. I've gotten mine. I always do. I guess it cuts down the risk.
Yep. Okay. Thanks. Other hands, other questions?
I see Ricky's hand.
Rick Jones.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, it's a big worry. I've talked with Dennis a few times on this. Our guys come in once in a while with a little sniffle or a little cough. They work through it. But this year is going to be so much different. We're not going to know if we got to send them home, we got to separate them, and like Dennis says, we got to try to break the crew up. And again, this is I'm going to put a little simple plug in. Village Garage is a very small place we have to get together, and we got to try to keep the guys away. And it's going to be tough. I've lost a few nights sleep over it, and possibly a couple gray hairs. I don't know. But yes, we're going to try it. Obviously going to do our best for the residents of Essex Junction. These guys take great pride in keeping these streets and sidewalks clear for you folks. But it's definitely a big worry for myself as management, and I'm sure Dennis the same way. Who knows what's going to go through that shop, and if you do, you just can't get another person to drive one of those plow trucks. That's the thing, the plow in the wing. You just can't throw a person in that has dump truck experience. Yeah, you could try it, but there's going to be some damage to equipment and property, and it's hard that you can't just go out and hire a guy to do that, or a person. There is a little bit of backup we have in the village for sidewalks as far as some contractors. We have a few that can hop in some of our, not the primary vehicles, but some of our secondary vehicles for these sidewalks. So again, we're going to try our best, obviously, and hope for the best and try to keep everybody safe. And again, I think a few of our guys have gotten the flu shots. I haven't checked with everybody. I know my team and a few others have. So, but yes, no, it's be a nervous time of the year. I don't believe the boards should go out, in my opinion, go out and say, hey, look, public, we might be not plowing streets this year. No, don't say that. We're going to do our darndest.
We won't do that yet.
No, yeah, please don't make them all nervous. It's just gonna be some nervous times for us as far as hopefully people stay safe and not sick, and we'll try to keep everybody separated. So, like I say, we're gonna do our best for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricky. We really appreciate it.
Ricky. Raj, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just thought just a quick question for Dennis and Ricky. I mean, there have been discussions with bordering towns about any kind of emergency mutual aid kind of situation? I realize that, just because one of our folks might be out doesn't mean they have fewer streets. But is that at all a possibility in any of this? Looking to neighbors like Williston and Colchester for some help or some modified routes if things get a little interesting.
Yes, we have. Actually, Williston took the lead a couple of weeks ago and sent out a form that we all kind of filled in as to what our resources were. We've been talking about it. I'm thinking we have, both the village and the town have pretty good descriptive maps of what our routes are and where to go. And I think a follow-up to what Williston's talking about is also they need to have maps available in their space so that if they were to call up and say, hey, we really, really need a truck, and we're at a point where maybe we can't do it at the beginning of the storm, we might be able to help them. I need to be able to send somebody over there who has some knowledge of where he's supposed to go and what he's supposed to do, and not just say, go to Williston and plow for the town of Williston. And I wouldn't want the same thing to happen to us in reverse.
No, don't let that happen.
I can see a whole bunch of mailboxes and,
200 mailboxes later.
Yeah, it happens. So, but yeah, I think that's one of the things we're going to do. The other thing we've done before, I know Ricky's done it, and I've got a sizable contractor who does, well, not sizable, but they do a fair amount of work for us. I know Ricky has one in the village, and we have one that does up on Carmichael Street, who's already volunteered that if he had to expand, he could do some of the areas that are close to his routes. He has large enough equipment that he would be able to help us out. It's not going to be a full road width or something like that, but it would be enough to get people out. If we get that, then a few days later, we can follow up when we have more people back to try to clear things out. I'm going to try to keep people on the road as much as we can. We have a larger garage area, but even then, and I know this goes back to getting together as a group, they really can't use the lunchroom other than to maybe get at the microwave or the refrigerator. And we're going to set up tables out in the garage, far enough apart, 2 people per table. It's heated. It's not fancy, but it's a place to, as long as they maintain that. And if they're inside this winter, the hard part is going to be enforcing the mask rule. But I'm going to be death on that, because we have to, if they're in there and they're not eating, they need to have a mask on. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, it's all these kind of things. That's why we want to have a meeting on Wednesday to just talk about, if they want to protect their job and their families and the guy or lady who's working next to them, they've got to be more than just a little careful on what they do. And we're going to, if we can keep them safe, we'll get the job done. The whole issue. And I think that also means away from work. You just don't congregate. If you want your job, you want the overtime, you want to, continue to feed your family and other kind of good stuff and keep a safe family, don't congregate.
Ricky, did you have more? Oh, guess
Yeah,
not.
we're going to, Dennis and I have talked about, swapping maps, give us the town maps. I'm going to throw them on the break table for the guys so they get their different sections there. He's going to have the village maps. So if we were to say get short, if we get short a guy or 2, then the other ones are going to have to pick up all that slack, and it's going to take that route, those guys, so much longer to do those routes. So at least the other employees will have a clue of, say, hey, go up the countryside, open that thing up for us, just punch it open, and they'll at least have a map that they've looked at, over this fall and stuff. So they have some sort of clue of where they got to go, what they got to do, just to punch these things open. We can go in and clean them up afterwards, as long as we don't lose the whole crew. Obviously, if we lose the whole crew, then that's going to be over. But yes, we have been discussing that, and like Dennis said, there's a person there in Williston that's been trying to gather information from all the other communities, and we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I think a lot of us in this in our field are definitely thinking about, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Because if it was the summer months, it'd be like, okay, well, that sidewalk doesn't get poured, or this street doesn't get paved, or something doesn't happen. This is like, no, snow's on the ground. People have to go places. The first responders got to get to places. So this is like a whole nother ball game. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, but we got this. We'll get it. Thank you.
You will. You'll do great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Elaine, yeah, go ahead.
Do we need adoption, right, Dennis?
Yes, please.
Right. Okay, so select board.
Should we take public comment?
Thank you, Andy. Yes.
Yeah.
I see Bruce Post. Do you have your hand up?
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Dennis, did I hear you say that if someone presents with certain symptoms, if they've had a flu shot, you're going to presume they have COVID?
No.
No.
What did you say? I'm just wondering.
We've got Travis has worked with us from HR, and we've got a whole protocol on what to do and dealing with our employees in terms of what do you do if you come in, and partially it's on supervision, it's partially on the employee. If they have a temperature. Now, if they're running a temperature and they may have had a flu shot, but if they're running a temperature over a 101, they're going to go get a COVID check. I mean, that's a given. If they're in there coughing and sneezing, we may tell them to go home, wait the next day and come back to see what your temperature is. So we do have protocols set out for all the what ifs. And the important thing is to meet with employees. That's what we're going to be doing this week and then over the next couple of weeks. So everybody understands what the ground rules are, and that we just don't need them in if they're sick. And I think that's part of Ricky's concern and my concern is we've had a lot of people who've had head colds in the past who have worked. And, it's hard when you're working long hours. You're going to get sick. The question is, what are they getting sick with? And then how do we prevent other employees from catching that. I mean, even if it's a simple thing like the flu, do we want that employee around other employees who are going to affect the workplace? And so we may end up having to say, hey, go home for a day, get some rest. And we have, every morning when they come in, we have a temperature gauge right there that we check temperatures just to make sure nobody's got one. So we've got the stuff in place. It's just, we've got a plan for that. What if things start to go downhill? And that's what we're talking about.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thanks, Bruce.
Are there any other questions or comments from the public on this item? I'm not seeing
No, I don't see any.
hands. Okay. So select board members, unless you have any further questions or comments, I'll accept a motion to approve the winter operations plan. Would a select board member like to make a motion to approve this winter operations plan?
I've got my hand up. I don't know if you can see it. I just wanted to get clarification of the procedure here. So this, we're just approving. Do we have to adopt at a later date, or is this all in one go? Because just questioning.
I think this is approve, and this is the one chance.
Because the way the recommendation is worded, it says after hearing public input. Is the public input what we just did, or is there a future public input intent plan? That's what I'm just.
I can chip in just very quickly. I think a few years ago, one of the select board members was concerned that we hadn't provided it to the public ahead of time. So we made sure this got on the webpage about 2 weeks ago, I think, 10 days, 2 weeks ago. And then we rely on the public input for the meeting, but it's not an ordinance. It's an operations plan that the boards approve that we can essentially point to when people call up and say, we're working within the context of the plan, and it's a plan for our operators so they know what they're supposed to do. So yes, a simple approval is what we need, Andy. Thanks.
Okay, all right. Then I will, willing to make the motion. I move that the select board approve the winter operations plan for 2020-2021.
I second it.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, John. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, thank you.
I will hear the same motion for the trustees, but first I see that I think Betsy Dunn, and I'm not sure what the protocol is here. Betsy, is that a new hand, or is that a hand that you left over from before?
It's a current hand based on what Dennis just said. I have one question.
Okay, sure.
So the question is, Dennis, when you said the public is being informed, are we putting this out like the plan out on Front Porch Forum or something more, so that, and putting on the community page of the Essex something, because not everybody knows that there are these kind of documents out there, and it might be worthwhile in putting it out there so that they can read it as well. And that way, or some kind of notice about it in those pages. I worry that people aren't going to know there is a plan, where to go to look for it. Thank you.
Yes, I'll answer that if I can. The answer is yes. We've talked to Evan and the other, his staff at 81 Main, and we waited for this meeting, and once the board approves it, we're going to figure out how to get it everywhere. I rarely contact the media and say, hey, we've got a story for you. But I think at some point we've got to get out to the media and let them know, be it television, radio, whatever else, that this is a problem. And it isn't just a problem for Essex, it's a problem for everybody. And if we do that, we can also put in the pitch that, for Essex residents, want more information, here's where you go. But yes, Front Porch Forum, Essex Reporter, although it's digital, and we're going to do everything we can to get the information out there to people. And early on in the storm, if we get phone calls, what we'll do is direct them right to the plan and say, this is what we're trying to do. And if you have any more questions, read it first. And that's usually what we do anyway. Here's the section you're interested in, read it, give me a call back, and we can talk. And that's what we've tried to do. We've got to figure out a way to get it out to everybody, because it doesn't do any good. I think Chris, my secretary, or administrative assistant, is going to kill me, because she's the one that gets all the phone calls. And I'm trying to save her from walking out the door. And so the more we do up front, it's going to be easier. It's going to be on her because, you know, she does not like taking those winter calls where she's holding the phone a foot away from her ear, trying to calm people down. So yeah, we need to get it out there. I agree. Whatever we can do, we're going to try.
Thank you, Dennis. So trustees, do I hear a motion to adopt the winter snow maintenance policy?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Dan made the motion, Raj seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dennis and Ricky. Let's have fingers crossed that it's not a rough winter.
Yep. Okay. Elaine, do you want to take it away on the next?
Sure.
Yep.
So item 5B, accept traffic study with change in speed limit from 30 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour on Sand Hill Road near Founders Road. I'm guessing this is something that Evan and Greg can start off with.
Greg, do you, is it gonna be you or is it Lieutenant Kissinger?
This is actually Dennis. Sorry, I had to find my mic and camera to bring myself back on. No, this is something that Dennis is presenting. It ties into the traffic ordinance, but some background to supplement and provide some substance and basis for what's coming up next.
Yeah, I'll start, but it's probably Rob is going to be the one who's going to pitch in too. Rob in the police department has done an excellent job, I should say an outstanding job of trying to codify and change over all the ordinances on traffic, speed limits, stop signs, yield signs, winter parking, you name it. He's really done an excellent job, and he's really responsible for the changes to the ordinance. One piece of that Public Works put in is we've had numerous complaints, one really especially last year, about trying to slow the speed limit down on Sand Hill Road from the approach to Founders Road in both directions. And I performed a speed limit analysis, a copy of which is in your document, which looked at that and found sufficient rationale to make it to 25 miles an hour. If the ordinance passes, we're prepared to put up signals, the flash speed limit signs at both approaches. They're purchased. If the board doesn't want to do this, we'll put them elsewhere, but that to me is an appropriate place to put them with kids walking to school. And it's an area where I know Rob can probably talk to more specifically because the police enforce a lot of speeders in that area. And what we're trying to do is make it safer for the school kids. So that's why we did the study up and incorporated that in the new traffic ordinance. And I don't know if Rob wants to add anything. I'll keep quiet at this point.
I think I'm all set, Dennis. I think it's collaboration amongst a lot of departments, not just myself. I had a lot of help from Shannon and both Village Public Works and Town Public Works to help get this document started.
So board members, or Greg, go ahead.
I would just say if the board members have any questions, now's the time. If not, then staff would be looking to have the board, select board, I suppose, accept this study. Then we can move on to the ordinance discussion.
Ron has his hand up.
Yeah, I see Chief Hoag's hand is up. Please go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to add that I thought that this was an appropriate study. I read it. Dennis did a good job putting this together. And I personally sat on Sand Hill Road a lot in the last couple of years and wrote many warnings and many tickets up there. So I believe that lowering the speed limit to 25 is a good thing. I would definitely support that.
Select Board, any questions or comments? George, I see we have a member of the public's hands up, but I want to let the trustees have their questions
Yeah,
first.
trustees, any comments from the trustees on this? I don't see any.
I would just a quick question. This is Raj, sorry. Just a very, very brief explanation on how you arrive at, it talks about the 85% speed. I don't want this to drag out, but just how does it work when you are determining whether the 25 mile an hour is appropriate based on what you're seeing from people driving on that road? I think you're muted.
Dennis, you're on mute.
Yeah. Actually, if you go to the MUTCD and you do the speed limit study, 85th percentile speed is an important one, but there's also situations such as what is the road, how wide is it, shoulder conditions, grade, sight distance, and there are some sight distance problems to the south of Founders Road around that fairly sharp curve. We've had people request a pedestrian crossing at that point, and we're opposed to that because of the lack of sight distance around that corner. Roadside development and culture, safe speed curves, and then pedestrian activities. And I think, so it's a combination of all those, plus accidents, speeding tickets that were issued, all those things enter in. They essentially come down to a decision that has to be made by, or at least a recommendation has to be made by a professional engineer to do it correctly as to whether the speed limit should be reduced or not reduced. And I know, and I probably misspoke in the beginning, I know people had come in and requested the reduction, but I kind of go in there with a blind eye and take a look at all the facts and then come back and say, on all these things, it isn't just 85th percentile, although that's a part of it. It's also all the other factors that weigh in as to, should this speed be reduced? And I think one of the biggest factors is the fact that it's the school zone. It's right, it's the main access into the school area from both directions. And with the kids now walking, it kind of changes the whole issue of pedestrian safety as well as speeding vehicles. And there is a crossing there just north of Founders Road. There's a pedestrian crossing at that point within this speed limit zone.
Thanks, Dennis.
Any other trustees? Nope. Okay. Thank you.
Pat, go ahead.
Thanks. This is probably getting a little ahead of ourselves, but just out of curiosity, I think this is a good and appropriate change. Certainly heard from some residents who live up on that road. But if this change doesn't bring the reduction in speed that we hope for, are there other alternatives that we could look at? Thinking, for example, whether they be, I don't know if it's, speed bumps or something along those lines, or are we just, at the moment, I'm assuming that we're just looking to hopefully drop the speed limit and then hopefully traffic, kind of follows along with that. But I guess a more sort of a procedural question, like if this doesn't bring the results that we hope it does, what do we typically do in a circumstance like that? What would be the next step?
I think we'd go back and look at the structure of the intersection. I'll be honest, I'm not a great fan of speed bumps. There's places where they do work, and the only places I've seen where they work are where you have multiple ones in a short space. There's a few going out of South Burlington towards Route 7 down there that seem to work, going through a housing complex down by Shaw's, but that's because there's probably 4 or 5 in a row, and it's pretty hard to not hit them at that point. We did a study many years ago when we got a grant, and we actually studied the speed limits before we put in some of these raised pedestrian crossings and afterwards. And in 50% of the speed counts, we did about 10 sites. Most of them are gone now. And in 50% of the data that we collected, the speed went up 2 miles an hour. And in 50% of the cases, the speed went down for 2 miles an hour. So I've never been convinced that they've actually been a solution. What you can do, though, is you can do other things. You can, for example, put in concrete. You can put in sidewalks. You can narrow the approach zones. You can't really take a car and park it in the road and in the parking lane. But believe it or not, that works in developments also, because whatever you can do to limit that space so people visually see, hey, I've got a confined space coming up, I've got to go slower. So you can do some of those other structural things to better define the intersection. Right now, that intersection is not curbed in all 4 directions. If you curb them, you got to put in storm drain systems. So it isn't, it isn't necessarily just one solution, but I mean, that's the kind of thing I would look to next. There's some form of structural solution to do it. Ultimately, another option might be an actual signal that's tied to school hours. That gets difficult in terms of enforcement. There's not enough traffic there to warrant, a red signal. But again, you have to start to look at every one of these, and you start at the low end. Easiest way, I think, is to do the speed limit and the signs, see what happens, and then we wait and see what kind of results we get. And if we have to step it up, we go to steps 2, 3, or 4.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, great. Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate it.
Any other board members before we open it up to the public? Okay, I had seen Betsy's hand is up, and I had also seen Mary post, but I don't see her hand anymore. So go ahead, Betsy.
Thank you, Elaine. I'm excited about the 25-mile-an-hour zone. I live off of Sand Hill, and I was hopeful that you were going to do it from the point where the pool is, because kids during the summer are trying to cross that road, and it's also dangerous for them there. It sounds like it's not going to come all the way up to even to Foster, but I would hope that we get it all the way to the turnoff of 15 on Sand Hill. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Anybody else? I think, George, the trustees need to approve, or?
No, I don't think the trustees.
No, this is select board.
Yes, just the select. I think the next one, if I'm not mistaken, we have a say in that, but not this one.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Dan, you had your hand up?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I didn't see Dan. Sorry about that, Dan.
I just saw
No,
it.
I just put it up.
Okay.
Elaine, you attended the regional planning meeting this past Wednesday. And I don't know if I think you came in after a segment, but the transportation secretary was present at that meeting for the state of Vermont. And before that, we had comments, I think, that night about projects that are coming forward in the next couple of years. And one of the projects, I believe, is on the list. Dennis, you might be able to confirm this, would be the intersection of Sand Hill right off 15. That whole intersection is being redesigned. There's a lot of issues there with traffic turning and trying to get onto 15. It's a dangerous intersection. So there's a lot that's going to be going on. And I agree with Dennis. I'm not a big fan in my career of speed bumps. It also is trouble for plows and everything else when you're clearing a road. But there's multiple ways to do traffic calming. So I think once that intersection's improved and other things are done, I think it might help quite a bit.
You're right, Dan. I believe that's part of the CERC alternatives list, that particular upgrade. So, okay. So select board, if you have no further questions, we can go ahead and approve or accept the traffic study. Would any of you like to make a motion?
I make the motion we accept the traffic study as presented.
Thank you, Dawn. Is there a second? Pat? Any further discussion?
Just a question. The recommended language was more specific than that. Do we need more specific language, or is what was said adequate?
Dawn, I believe you said that your motion was to accept the report.
As presented, yes.
As presented.
It was to accept the traffic study as presented.
Okay. So, Greg, do you feel that's a sufficient motion, or do you want Dawn to read the whole thing aloud?
I'm comfortable with it. Dennis, are you comfortable with it? I'd say it's a good enough
Okay.
motion. It's as presented. I think that captures it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Greg. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Next item, 5C. Approve passage of revised motor vehicles, traffic and parking ordinances and warn public hearing for final passage.
I'm sorry. We moved 5E to 5C.
What? Wait a second.
I'm sorry.
No, we moved 5E to after 5C.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So this is a little more complicated, and we're going to need someone to, I went through it, and I have to admit, I don't quite understand, so I'm going to need someone to perhaps walk us through this.
So maybe I can start this out for you, Jordan.
That'd be good.
So as this kind of leads into or follows along with what we've been talking about here the last few minutes, so just changing ordinances. So what we had been originally thinking we were going to do was we were going to create a set of ordinances that both would look exactly the same, but then the trustees and the select board would pass them both. And that would save some work with merger if that was to occur, and also it would save a lot of confusion for our folks because they'd be working out of the same book and the same ordinance. But I think after we got going with this, we realized that there was going to be probably an issue if we had an ordinance for the village trustees, especially that included language that had roads outside of the village. So what we did was we went back and we just basically pulled out the village ordinances out of that original document and put those into a separate one for you folks to look at. And then we had the original document for the select board that includes all of the language for the village and the town. That hopefully, if things go along where merger occurs, then this might save some work on their part.
I see. All right.
And if there's a transitional board, they can go back and they can work on the ordinance for both. So that's where we're at. So I guess we're looking to have you both take a look at the ordinances that we presented, make sure that those look okay, and then move forward with passing those ordinances or adopting those ordinances. And I do have Lieutenant Kissinger here tonight because he crafted both of these. So if there's any specific questions, I'm going to defer to him to answer those.
Okay, Chief, if I could just clarify in terms of process, what you're saying is that what's before us tonight is essentially for the select board's approval, but there's potential for trustee input because it does impact the village, but we're not approving this tonight. We're just here to participate and add any insight or concerns that we have. Is that correct?
Well, a little bit, but I think, and Greg can probably clarify that because he knows the procedure of adoption a little bit more. But in my understanding, the village trustees also have a ordinance of their own to now adopt that has changes and updates to it.
Okay, but we're not seeing that tonight. We're going to see that at a separate meeting. That's my point. Is that what you're saying?
Greg?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So Lieutenant Kissinger provided the draft ordinance for the town and the village. Both are in your packet. We had originally scheduled this thinking, as Chief Hoyt just explained, that we could do this as one package for the town and village ordinance. Figured we would present it to the boards tonight, even though they're now separated. That way both boards can hear the discussion. The police can hear the discussion about which direction the boards want to take on the ordinance. Ultimately, as far as approval process goes, if the boards are comfortable, both boards are comfortable tonight, the select board will make a motion to, let me just find the wording. They pass the ordinance, and they can authorize staff to warn a public hearing for November 23rd, which is the next joint meeting. If there's no changes after that, the select board can adopt the ordinance to take effect immediately or at any time. At that point, staff's recommendation would be that the trustees adopt the ordinance at the same time as the select board on November 23rd. The trustees, the village defers to state law, which says that once the ordinance is passed, it takes effect 60 days later if there's no petition to overturn it. So the recommendation from staff would be that the trustees accept it on the 23rd, the select board do their final passage and have it take effect 60 days later. That way the police can start enforcing both ordinances at the same time. They don't need to try to keep track of, well, which one's in effect now, which one needs to wait 30 more days. And that this way it's everyone's talking about traffic at the same time.
Right. But what you would like from the trustees tonight is our approval to proceed with the process of adopting the ordinance, which isn't going to happen until November, but you want to get confirmation from us to staff to proceed with the process of doing this. Is that correct?
As far as we don't need a formal motion to do that.
Okay.
We would like input from the trustees.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we yeah. Okay. Thanks, Greg. Thank you.
That way, once it's presented on the 23rd, all input will be there, and we can hopefully have a fairly brief meeting and discussion.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
And I have the Word version available, at least of the select board version, in case anybody has specific questions or changes that they want to make.
Okay, thank you.
Lieutenant Kissinger is available if anybody has questions. Hopefully you've all had a chance to read the ordinance at this point. If you want to hit any high notes, we can do that, but I think just if there's questions or anything you want us to touch on, there's a good way to approach it.
I see Raj and then Andy and then Amber.
So sorry, I did go through these, but I just want to make sure. So following, let's say all of these are approved by both boards, there will still be village ordinances and there will still be town ordinances. Right. But if there's a merger, they're all ready to combine. Just want to make sure I'm understanding that. Okay, that's
correct.
All right. Sorry, I know it just.
It's confusing.
It's okay, Raj. We're making new ground here.
I think
Andy, go ahead.
Andy had a hand. Andy,
I think Amber's hand was up before mine.
Oh, Amber.
It's all good, Andy. You can go ahead of me.
Oh boy.
Okay. All right. Section 720.040B mentions a village clerk. Just want to make sure that's the right words.
Andy, because we're including the village portion of the ordinances in our ordinances, that language is in there as the town clerk should clerk.
Did we lose him?
We might have lost him. I'll try to speak up. Chief Hoig, correct me if I'm wrong. The goal was to specify that this is still the village ordinance. We do only have one clerk, town and village-wise right now, so we could change it to town clerk, or if the trustees prefer to keep it, indicate that it's the village clerk, that's fine. Staff's recommendation would be to change it to just clerk.
Yep.
It's the same.
Yep. We no longer have a village clerk, so yeah, we could definitely change that.
Okay, that was my only question. Just want to make sure that we had the right words in there. It shouldn't say town clerk. Right? It should just say clerk. Right. Or are you changing it in both documents? I get it.
Are you all set?
Okay. Any other question? Amber, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. I see that there was a whole new section on exemptions for the winter parking ban. And I was just curious as to what potentially qualifies a person for an exemption under the parking ban. It's 7.20.050. Yep.
So a lot of times, Amber, what we'll do is we'll have people that have family up for the holidays, and there's really no snow on the ground. There's no forecast for snow. So we would allow them to park on the street, provide us with the information of the vehicles and a phone number. So if weather does turn for the worse, we would call them to move the vehicles off the road rather than ticket or tow them. That was our goal for that.
Okay. Thanks.
Other questions?
All right. Would we like to have, oh, go ahead, Ricky.
Just let the Board of Trustees know, I have gone over this with Rob Kissinger, and everything looks great, and appreciate all her work on this. And, like, again, we've gone over this stuff. It's in line, we should be doing. FYI for you guys.
Ricky, can you, I think some of us, there was a little bit of interference, was probably from someone else's mic. Could you just, I'm sorry, could you repeat what you just said? Some of us didn't hear it.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, my bandwidth's not that great up here.
Okay.
I've gone over this with Rob Kissinger in the last couple of years. We've gone through this stuff, and he's made a lot of great recommendations. We made some changes in this, and no, just FYI for the Board of Trustees, we've gone through this, and everything that he's put in is looked great.
Oh, good. Okay, that's very reassuring. Thank you. Appreciate that, Ricky.
I just have a quick question, if I could.
Yep.
Under the parking violations penalties, I think it's 7.20.861. There's two numbers listed, two different colors in this document. I just didn't know if the penalties for some of these doubled or if it's second offense kind of thing. First offense, second offense. It's page 34 on our PDF anyway. I don't know if that helps. 7, 8. It's almost near the end, Greg.
So the difference in colors, are you seeing like a blue and a red?
Correct. Yep. Abandoned vehicle says 25 in red, 50 in blue. That kind of thing.
Yeah, so those are first and second offenses, or excuse me, one's a waiver amount, and if they challenge it, then that would be the higher fine. So the waiver amount would be a $25 fine. If they want to go to court and they lose, they would pay the $50 fine.
Now, the way the PDF's formatted, now I see that way over on the side, and that makes more sense. Sorry, it just wasn't lined up.
Yeah, sure.
I just wanted, basically, I was wondering if we up the fines with this process, that's all. So this makes more sense.
Some of these we didn't actually have fines for, so that's why everything that's in red on the document is something that we're adding, recommendations from everybody's input from the village public works, town public works. So those should be the first things that jump right to your eye, or things that we adding are all in red or changing.
So when you say something like unregistered vehicle, trailer, or equipment, where would that have to be to receive a fine? On private property or public property?
Public property, because right now we have a lot of complaints in the village of people leaving their cars on the road unregistered.
Yep.
And this spells it out. It simplifies everything.
Yep. I like it.
And this ordinance wouldn't be the correct place for 6 or 8 unregistered vehicles to be parked in a yard, then, that sort of thing.
No, we can do that as not a public nuisance, but that'd be like probably under the quality of life ordinance.
Yeah, if I can jump in, Raj, I think the village has ordinances for that kind of thing, but it wouldn't be under traffic. It's under some other And I can't give you the language, but I know that back a number of years ago, we specifically passed something for that. How effective it is a different issue, but we have something like that, but it's not in the traffic code.
It's a zoning thing or something, is it?
Yeah, I think it's zoning. Yeah. Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
So George, if any board members don't have any further questions, then perhaps we should open this one up to the public as well.
Yeah, Raj, is your hand still up or is that residual? Is that left over? Okay, we're good, I think, right? Okay.
Okay. Are there any members of the public that wish to comment on this item before a motion is put on the floor?
Mary Post.
Mary Post, go ahead.
Hi, just a question. This is the first time I ever heard that if you have company, you can call and get permission to have a car not be on the street. And I'm wondering, is that also for the town or was that just for the junction?
Mary, that's for both. It's not currently an ordinance, but people have called in the past enough where we thought we had to include that into the ordinance to make allowances for such occasions. So that does include the town.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Okay, well, select board members, if you're satisfied with this and wish to approve these changes and warn a public hearing, then if we look at our cover memo for this, the language for a motion, Greg, right? You know, if you want, you're saying if we approve this, then you recommend that we pass the revised ordinances and authorize staff to publish a warning, right?
That is correct. That's the process. And we will warn the public hearing for November 23rd. And depending on the outcome of that hearing, the board can either pass the ordinance at that time, or if they want to make changes, we would warn another public hearing for the future.
Okay. So then basically the motion you need from us is to warn the public hearing.
To pass the ordinance and to warn the public hearing.
Okay. Would any board members like to make that motion?
Sure, I'll do it. I move that the select board pass the revised motor vehicles traffic and parking ordinance and authorize staff to publish a summary of the proposed revisions in a newspaper of general circulation and warn a public hearing for November 23rd, 2020 to consider final passage of the motor vehicles traffic and parking ordinances.
Thank you, Andy. Is there a second? Dawn, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you very much.
Now for the trustees, I don't, and Greg or Evan, jump in here, but I'm assuming that we're a little different. We're saying we want to give you approval to proceed with the process of adopting the ordinance. Is that correct?
That would be fine. You don't even need to do that, but happy to take a motion for it.
Okay, why don't we do that? So do I hear a motion from one of the trustees to proceed with the process of adopting the ordinances?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Raj moved and Dan second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Rob and Ron.
Thanks,
thank
Rob.
you very much.
Thank you both very much.
So your work is appreciated, and we do really, I know it's a lot of work, and really appreciate the effort that went into this.
You're very welcome.
And Ricky.
And well, yeah, the fact that Ricky approved, that was gold in my mind.
Yeah, Ricky and Dennis as well. And I just wanted to say, this is, we have several other ordinances that we're looking at. So this is a kind of a test for us to see how this went. So once this is through, we will have several others for you to look at. So
great.
Thank you very much for being proactive about that, Ron, especially seeing as going forward, with merger, one of the big concerns of the select board was making sure that an ordinance alignment process was in place. So
Right.
thank you for taking care of that for us. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. We understand the importance of that. So.
All right. Now we get to our amended agenda items. So we moved item 5E, the update on Out and About, to come next. So Evan, why don't you tell us more about how well that program went?
Sure. Greg, can you, I sent you that email earlier. Can you put that up on the screen? So just so you all know, both the village and the town worked together on filing for a state grant with this great state agency with the initials ACCD. We each received $10,000 grants to do an event, which we rebranded as Out and About. Maybe you saw the logo and the banners, etc. We quickly worked with local businesses to participate in the program, and we determined that a $15 amount could be given per household, and we had budgeted $15,000 of the grant money to go out. The rest was for advertising and banners, etc., with the hope that if this event was successful, we would look to do this again the following year. So as of today, you will see $6,490 has been collected in receipts to reimburse to the businesses that you see below. In general, and this is early, so I mean the event was really only in local government time days ago. So we expect we had distributed 100% of the $15,000 in vouchers. We are hopeful that 100% of the $15,000 will be claimed by these businesses, which we had 50 of them in the village and the town, which is nice to see. There's a couple of names in here. Ray's Seafood participated in the town outside the village. Wicked Wings, town outside the village. Turner Toys, and right now the leader in responses. One of the things that we heard from several of the businesses like Turner Toys was this rivals a holiday, a Christmas holiday period for sales, which definitely warms our heart to hear that. It was great in terms. Annie Cooper and Robin were working on entertainment. We had great bands and entertainment. They were pros, working in some difficult small venues, but they were great. They showed up on time. They did 2 hours each. People were listening, dancing. Annie was taking pictures. Saturday morning, there was a couple in front of the bridal shop putting on a dance clinic. Don't know their names, but they're going to be on posters soon. And so in general, we got a lot of positive comments, not only from the businesses, but our combined residents, that they really appreciated that we did this, that we spaced out the entertainment both in the village and the town. So if they wanted to go to a particular business or a restaurant, they got a chance to also partake in some of the musical acts. And so overall, I'm open to listen to comments from board members and the public, but we'd like to do it probably in the spring and late summer again. And we would put together a program in the budget process for those two events and continue to work together, village and town outside the village.
I see Amber's hand up.
It was a great event. And I think one of the things that was really beneficial was changing the requirement and allowing folks to be able to pick up the vouchers on Saturday and Sunday. At Lincoln and up at Essex Experience. We saw a lot of folks. I was out there for a couple hours handing out vouchers. I mean, we ran out of vouchers on Saturday, and I think it was really good to do that piece of it. I do think, there was a lot of folks that I talked to who weren't even aware that we were doing it. So maybe some additional, media pieces that we do for next time. I know we were short on time. So if we're going to try to plan this ahead of time next time, maybe some additional outlets to do that. One quick question, Evan, is when do they have to turn in the vouchers in order to get reimbursement by?
Great question. I know that our friends at ACCD gave us a deadline. I believe it's November 15th that our grant paperwork has to be into them.
Now, your event has to be held by the end of November, but your reporting is December 1st.
December 1st.
There you go.
Okay.
So they've got time.
Yeah, they got a little bit of time.
Thanks.
You're welcome. I also, when after your questions, I want to give a shout out to the Out and About team that was assembled. So go ahead and ask questions.
Other questions? Board members?
It was a fabulous event. I'm so happy to see so many different businesses enjoying the benefit. And Turner Toy and Hobby, they turned it into a marketing opportunity for themselves by informing their own mailing list, which it shows the results were great for them. So it was a really good partnership, and I'm very happy, Evan, to hear that you'd like to do it again more than once next year.
Yep.
Maybe a quick shout out to Robin Pierce, who came up with the original idea, which we did open and outside. So we just took his foundation and made it Out and About. Or if you'd like to say it in Canadian, oot in a boot.
That's right.
Tammy, Linda, Brad, Owiso, Annie Cooper, all of them, the trustees, the select board members who manned some booths to answer questions, hand out vouchers, etc. Those vouchers were really well done. They were very visual. And so the restaurants and the businesses who put placards in their windows understood the program. We will only get better at this. And again, we are set, with approval, we will set the spring and summer dates. We want to make sure we're not in conflict with anything else. The banner that we put over the dam, it has a changeable date in it, hoping that you would say yes. And so that investment won't go away. Thank you to the state who came up with this grant for us. And if we find out that they have some grant money left, maybe we'll figure out something else to do before the end of the year. But in general, it went pretty well. And it just, one thing we want to be a little bit concerned with, they end up being long days. So we may kind of move it, into, a little, squeeze it in a little bit, but overall it was well received. And so we're encouraged. And I think it was something that the village and the town need in terms of building Five Corners as the place to go, town center, place to go. That's where you go for entertainment. You don't have to leave town. You don't have to go to that town that starts with an S. It's up near a mountain. You don't have to. We've got it all here.
Evan, I was there for a number of hours on both days, handing out vouchers and I sat with, and I was absolutely shocked that very few people were interested in merger or had any local political questions. But most people were very interested in what restaurants they could go to and getting their vouchers. So I just wanted to report that maybe making it completely non-political next time would be a good strategy too.
Well, come on, there had to be at least 2 people.
I don't think so. I think it was you, maybe, and someone else on the staff.
Yeah, let's be honest, merger is not always at the top of the list.
It was too festive a mood to be worrying about that stuff.
Yeah. Yep. So it's really nice to see this list, and we're hoping to see, so we only have 17. So there is 33 other vendors who have to submit.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot more than this.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you, Evan.
Thanks very much, Evan, and for all that you and staff did.
Oh, it was all them. I just said yes a lot.
No, you did way more than that, Evan.
Unless there are other board comments, I'll open it up to the public. Does anyone from the public have any comment to make about this item? I see Ken. Go ahead, Ken.
Ken? Ken, you might be muted.
How about now? Better?
There you go.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, I went to both days. It was really quite great. There's a group of businesses that this kind of event really benefited that, nobody's really mentioned much, and I just wanted to point it out. Restaurants, of course, are suffering terribly, and this certainly helped those folks out. But the bands, that's a business that's also been hurt quite a bit by the COVID, not being able to entertain much. And you guys employed a lot of musicians. That was wonderful. I took some great videos, posted those, and yeah, I just wanted to let you know that I recognized anyway that I appreciate that revenue going to the bands.
Thank you for reminding me, Ken. We had over 60, I have a little echo going on. We had over 16 bands. They really, and they were talented. And yeah, Ken, great point. And a lot of their outlets, bars and other venues, are just not doing in-person entertainment. So they were really appreciative. And one thing that we are going to clean up is most bands get paid on site when they perform. Because we're a government, we have to do W-9s and put people into our payroll system. We couldn't do it on site. So once we know in advance that what we're going to do, we will get all their information and be able to give them a check on site during our next events. But Ken, thank you for reminding me.
Thank you. Other comments?
Looks like we can move on.
Yep.
So our last business item is discussion about local option tax for March 2021 ballot.
Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, select board policy requires me to state in open meeting why I'm recusing myself. So I've got to say this out loud before I leave. So due to in order to avoid the potential perception of a conflict of interest due to my employment with a large employer in the village, I need to recuse myself from this discussion. And with everybody's permission, I won't rejoin after the discussion.
Thank you, Andy.
We understand. It's too bad you can't participate, but we understand.
All right. Good night.
Good night, Andy. Thank you.
Good night, Andy.
So, is Sarah? There's Sarah.
Hey, Sarah. Sarah, do you want me to open or do you want to do?
I'll open.
You go.
All right. So we just want to bring this back up. I know we've talked about it some sort of in the spring, last fall. We want to bring it back in front of you because it remains a priority for staff to diversify revenue sources where at all possible. We are looking at, or we're hopeful that the boards will be open to considering putting this on the March 2021 ballot, this being the local option tax in Essex. I do want to make a couple clarifying points about my memo before we get to the point, which is just another opportunity to look at it, think about it, refresh our memories, and get our questions together as staff reprioritizes this initiative, make sure we are on the right track. The local option tax would be an additional 1% tax charged on meals and rooms, which is MRT, meals and rooms tax, and sales and use tax, SUT. This is similar to all the the same as the surrounding communities, Williston, Colchester, St. Albans, South Burlington, all around us. That additional 1% goes to the state. The state keeps 30% of the 1% to administer it, and they send us 70% of the 1% back. There's a table in the middle of the memo which shows what we would have collected had we have had the 1% local option tax on meals and rooms and sales and use over the last 5 fiscal years. I do want to be very clear that FY20 goes through June 30th, 2020, so I do not feel like the impacts of the pandemic are accurately reflected here, although the tax is charged at point of delivery, so any online sales are included in this if they're delivered in Essex. However, these are big numbers. This is not just a little bit of money that I feel like we're leaving on the table, and even if we had a portion of this going forward into the future, that it could really help reduce the reliance on the property tax in a way that would be meaningful for everyone. So it's our hope tonight that, just to bring it back toward the top of the very long, high priority, heavy list of things we have going on, and get you thinking about questions, initiatives, outreach, things that you want us to be doing as we go forward. Evan, would you add anything to that?
Sure, I'm going to add. So for the boards, as part of our review, one of the reasons we are bringing this forward and is as a town-wide initiative is because of one, it has a town-wide benefit, but two, the way the Department of Taxation operates, because Essex only has one zip code, 05452, that they have not separated the village businesses out from the town businesses. And therefore, if we were to do the tax, they would prefer us to do it townwide because that's how their data is done. And then, so it also, as we talked earlier with the police, it would be very confusing if it wasn't adopted townwide. So with that, we can answer questions or direction of things that you would want to know for us to bring back. One thing we have done in the last couple of months, Greg reached out to a few businesses to get comments. I believe, and George, this was brought up, is it now 12 years ago?
Yes.
This was brought up?
Yes.
And I think it was brought up in the infancy of this program by the state.
It wasn't infancy. I would say it was more like toddlerhood. I mean, there are a couple of Chittenden County communities that had it for several years. I think it was in place for several years.
So people had a lot of questions. They didn't quite understand how they could, how we would affect local businesses. What I can tell you from my experience, because I came from Illinois that has a local sales tax and they have municipalities have the ability to raise an extra 1%. Very few people, if anybody, drives out of their way to avoid a tax.
Right.
You know, unless it's a huge ticket item. But here's the fun thing about Vermont: it's actually where the sale is delivered. So if you buy something and you have it delivered to 05452, we get the tax.
Right.
But they also do not tax vehicles or anything that the state taxes themselves. They restrict us from getting any of that. So they're not double taxing you. And so one of the things you could see, if you want to pull that chart back up, Sarah, depending upon what COVID is actually doing, or Greg, thank you, actually doing to the local economy, you could see the FY average ranges from 1.287 in FY16 to roughly $1.3 million. And that's minus, and then we would get 70% of that, right, Sarah?
No, that's
the 70%. Those are the dollars that we would have.
That's the 70%. So, again, as Sarah mentioned, it is not small. And one of the things that I think what we would like to do is, because I have some experience in this, you do not budget all of that money because sales tax can be volatile, as we can imagine in a pandemic. If stores close, if they move in, they move out. You don't want to budget the entire amount of money, but if you budget 80 to 80%, you're probably in a safe zone. You leave the extra 20% as a surplus for, and then you put it into your capital fund so that the money gets used, but the property tax is not reliant 100% on that amount of money.
Yeah, Evan, if I could, I'll take other question, but since it's fresh in my memory, you jogged a couple of things in my mind, and
sure.
If you don't mind me, and Raj, I see you have your hand up. I hope you don't mind. Just want to jump in because my memory sometimes fades.
You were the presenter in 12 years.
Yeah, but a couple of the things that came up last time, and we tried so hard to disprove this and reach out. But so many people were convinced that this would hurt local businesses, and we had already looked at other surrounding communities, and we hadn't found any evidence that it would hurt anyone's business. So that might be something for you to look into, to not reach out to other businesses necessarily, but to talk to South Burlington, Winooski, Williston, towns that have had this, and say, has anyone gone out of business since you've had this? Have they said, I'm shutting down because you have that local option tax? And that question is going to come up, and it'd be great if you have a good answer. Number two, the other thing that I thought at the time was the biggest source of revenue that we anticipated from this was going to be from IBM because of their cafeteria. They have the largest cafe, and they probably, and since it's Global Foundries now, but probably still is the largest eating establishment in the state of Vermont. I don't know how many people they feed every day, but they feed a lot. And that, again, came up, well, this is going to hurt IBM, and this would be, well, they're going to hurt Global Foundries. But again, we had a hard time convincing people, no, this doesn't come out of the bottom line of the company. This comes out of the employees' pockets, and but still. And then two other things. One was online sales. There was a lot of confusion about what happens with online sales. As you said, it's the point of delivery that gets taxed. It's not where it comes from, but that's an important point to clear up because that did trip us up the last time around. And lastly, you're absolutely correct. You don't want to be dependent on this. It's icing on the cake, really. It's capital projects that you'd like to get done, but you don't have to get done because, as you just pointed out, sales go up and down. Unlike property taxes, which you can anticipate, what your grand list value is every year. You can't anticipate what your sales revenue is going to be every year. So that's those are my 4 points that jumped out at me from last time.
shall do, let me give you an example
Right.
of a food tax. If you have a $10 bill, right? Food, drink, etc. 1% is 10 cents.
I know. I know.
10 cents. Just so everybody knows, 10 cents.
I know, but nevertheless.
And if anybody has seen the line at the Starbucks drive-through all day, every day,
I know.
they are not going anywhere else but it's
I know.
Just, I know. I know this, and I hear you. I've worked in sales tax towns for 24 years of my career. I've seen lots of things, but I've never seen anybody drive more than 10 miles out of their way to save 10 cents, other than my sister. But she's a little odd.
Yeah.
But we will address those. I'm here to take more questions.
I think Raj had his hand up first. Yeah. I'm not sure. I know Amber does. Raj, I'm gonna let you go.
So in that vein, Sarah, Evan, anybody else that has an answer to this, what also came up at those that last effort, utilities, cable, cell phones, natural gas, fuel oil, fuel pellets. What else are we forgetting? I say electricity bill. Any of those hit by this? Do we know?
We do know. I have to dig up my memo, Raj. Actually, I think you were in attendance at the Capital Committee meeting in the audience when I presented the memo right around the time you were elected, because you had some input on how it impacts photographers as well that I didn't have in my presentation. Oh, I'm not connected to the VPN, so I can't pull it up. But we have accumulated much of that data. It does not affect in general your utilities, like your heat, your electric cost. If you are renting a water heater, for example, that is taxable. Cable is taxable. So I'll have to dig that back up. But it is a good reminder that is some critical baseline information as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I remember one of the public forums, there was a lot of angry people saying you're going to hit my basic needs every month, which is a fair argument, but I just want to make sure that we know specifically what those would be. And food, it's not an extra 1% on groceries that weren't taxed in the beginning. And clothing, I honestly don't remember how it treats clothing, but clothing until what, 120, 150 is tax-free. And this doesn't add on to that until it gets to the taxable portion, right?
I believe that's correct, Raj.
Yeah, so I just, we have
to
have a good one-pager on.
We have the state's guide on those that we will be able to publish on the website, etc. That are they are well done. They are in depth. What is taxed, what is not taxed, and again, I think some of it is what you would do with the revenue. And while you have not had these discussions yet, I will be happy to propose a plan to all of you with Sarah's help on some numbers on property taxes, sharing, and capital that you should have a discussion on should the tax pass.
Thank you. Thanks, Evan. So, Elaine, I've got Amber, Dan, and then Patrick.
I think, Amber and Dan had their hands up first.
I put mine down. I'm just all set. I just wanted to say Raj covered what I wanted to say, so I don't need to.
We'll take your name off the list, Dan. Amber.
Yeah, Evan's right. So there were some fact sheets that were provided to the Capital Committee, and they're really very good. That's not what I was going to say, though.
Okay.
I am a little concerned. I'm on the fence about whether I would support putting this on the ballot for March. My concern is that I'm absolutely in favor of the local option tax. My concern is that we're putting two fairly large issues in front of the voters in a very short period of time here to turn this around. And so I think the question that I have is, if we don't put it on in March, I'm not advocating that this is what I want to do. I'm still on the fence. But could we do a special election that's
Yes.
or a special vote, you know, for specifically just the local option tax, and what would that entail? And you guys might not have the answer to this tonight. That's fine. I just want to throw it out there.
We'll add it to the list.
Can I jump in? I don't want to jump in. I know Pat's anxious. I don't want to jump in, but one option would be, and you're exactly right, Amber, but there are 2 elections in the springtime. There's a town annual meeting, and then a month later, there's the school annual meeting, which is a Australian balloting. So that might be an appropriate time to set the 2 apart. I just threw that out there because that just occurred to me. So let's see. I think Pat Murray had his hand up.
Thanks, George. Yeah, I'm very much for this. I absolutely think that it's sellable. I think the last time that this came around, you know, again, as you spoke about toddlerhood, I mean, since then, every other town around us
it's
has
a
done
big
it.
one now, yeah.
Right. I mean, it's really basic, I think, at this point, with appreciation, Amber, as well, for the number of items that we do have coming up to vote. I think that most people are familiar with this enough by now, because everyone shops in Williston. Everyone has shopped in South Burlington at the mall. Everyone knows that there's just a 1% tax on that. I don't really particularly think, you know, and again, my personal opinion, I don't really think it would be a hard sell or hard explanation, because I think that, you know, 90% of Chittenden County is, you know, kind of under that already, or at least, you know, our towns that are, you know, very, you know, close to us in size and scale. So I would have no problem putting it on in March. And this is one of the very few ways that we can look at, you know, getting some sort of property tax relief for our people, putting, you know, money into capital projects that we know, you know, kind of get pushed back or need to, you know, wait for some time. I mean, it's the longer we wait on it, you know, the more money is not coming in. And I just, at this point, honestly, I don't see any reason to continue putting this off. I really don't.
Yeah.
Elaine?
So George, if I may.
Yes.
So I recall back when this happened last time, one of the issues around IBM had to do with taking delivery of supplies and equipment on the Essex side of their campus and having to pay use tax on that, or pay the local options tax on that. So I would want to confirm whether that is still, because then it wouldn't just be the cafeteria.
Right. True. Good point.
And so other manufacturers in the town would be exposed to the same tax as well.
That's right. That's right. Good point, Elaine. Raj came back. Raj.
Well, that is an excellent question. I think if those items, though, are used in manufacture and they're used to make something else, then those items are not taxed. So
True,
it's
but
only if they're excess or they're used. It's fairly limited, I think, in the use. I mean, if they're used for producing another product, their ingredients or their you know, yeah, that's a tough one.
Well, you're right
You have to
about
look at
that.
the nature of our manufacturing in our community and what that looks like. Yeah.
You're right about that, Raj. Manufacturing supplies are exempt. However, toilet paper, pens, thumb drives, you know, equipment, things not equipment that's manufacturing related is not included. And that was the point back then. It wasn't the chemicals and the wafer ingredients and all that we're talking about. It was the non-manufacturing equipment and supplies.
The stuff you run your office on.
Yes, admin.
Okay. Trustees, select board, other thoughts, comments, insights,
Well,
guidance? Dan?
no, I was just going to say, we're not going to be the first community in the state, obviously.
Oh, no.
Or the others. The issues that we're talking about, I'm sure, have been addressed by the communities. So I was opposed to it back when it was first proposed. I don't know how many years ago, but like 12 years ago, I guess. But as things have developed in the county, most of the communities around us already have this local option tax. In fact, South Burlington, their town manager was seeking to double that.
Yes.
So, obviously, there's a desire for it.
Yep. Good point, Dan.
Dawn's hand up.
Raj.
Oh, go for Dawn.
Dawn.
Dawn. Yeah, sorry.
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute, and I don't want to upset anybody. But if you went with the local options tax, would the village then give up their 2 separate tax districts? So you wouldn't be adding 3 cents, you'd only be adding a penny?
Dawn, are you referring to the economic development tax, and then what's the third one?
They have their sidewalk and their economic development, those 2 separate taxes they wanted. If you go with the local options, wouldn't some of that money go to the economic development part?
Well, I think we're two things going on here. I think we're talking about this outside of the context of merger, first of all. And Dawn, I'm gonna mute your mic just so the echo goes down, but then just reopen it when you're ready to talk, okay? So I think we're talking about this outside the context of merger, and the sidewalk district is a part of merger, not anything that exists now. If this passes in March, then it can go into effect by July 1, and it possibly even sooner than that, if I'm not correct. So I hear what you're saying, and it will impact the math of merger because it will offset the cost of capital for the entire community in ways that Evan and Sarah will explain to us in the future. As far as the economic development tax that the village has, that's their tax to deal with as they see fit.
Yeah, I'd jump in, Lane. Keep in mind, those are both property taxes. And the economic development tax is about to go away this year.
Yeah.
It was a 3-year window. I could be maybe 4 year. I can't remember. Was it 4 year, Sarah? 3 or 4 year? You're muted, but she's holding up 4 fingers.
I think it was 5 years.
Oh, it's 5 years. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's I think it's about to go away.
It is.
And that was a property tax, so that would be different. But what I see that this would do, my understanding of how this would work, this would be divided roughly between the village and the town and go mainly towards those things that we don't usually put property taxes for. I mean, we put property taxes towards capital improvements, but we always have way more capital improvements in need of funding than we have funding. And in my mind, Evan, Sarah, you can pipe in here, but in my mind, that's where this money goes. This goes to basically to fund help us with the backlog of capital improvements. That's usually what the other communities have used it for. Is that correct?
That's what our recommendation would be. Go ahead, Evan.
So the answer is our recommendation would be that all proceeds go towards capital projects.
Yeah.
And none, if not very little, should be designated for operating.
Yeah. So the sidewalk district, that's an operational process. That's property taxes used to pay for routine maintenance on village sidewalks.
As the village and the town know, there is a backlog of projects.
Huge.
There's a wish list out there, etc. But there's also a desire to address property taxation as it currently is, and this could be a bridge for that effort.
Right. I just want to clarify. Our recommendation is that this goes to fund capital. And one of the things that's currently happening is we're having operating transfers into the capital funds on both sides to fund capital, as you all recently saw. on page like 28 of my last memo to you. And that this would be able to reduce those operating transfers, which reduces the pressure on the property tax to fund the capital. So it's not property tax and now local options. There's sort of a minor shifting that redistributes the funding mechanism to local option tax.
Right. I mean, we're in the merger charter, we're saying, we're designating, among other things, the village as a debt payment district. And what is the village's debt? The village's debt is money we took out because we were so far behind in funding our capital projects. We had to jumpstart the thing. I mean, so it would absolutely help with that. But it's a very good question, Dawn. I know it would, and it's certainly going to get a little confusing explaining all this to the voters. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think we can keep it straight.
Thanks, guys. I was just curious.
Yep.
I throw this joke out. If Sarah can explain the separation cost, etc., she'll be able to handle local options tax easier.
Right.
Right, Sarah? You can beat me up tomorrow.
Not a problem.
I will.
Raj had his hand up.
Yeah, just so this is going to come up as a question, so I'm just going to ask it here. So let's say this won't happen, but let's say merger doesn't pass. Local option tax passes.
Right.
It could happen. You know, that scenario could happen. So,
oh, sure.
All right. So then there we are, unable to kind of really disentangle which community contributed what. So what is the current thinking on how that capital money gets allocated to the village and the town outside the village?
So,
or do we know yet? I mean, I've heard, we've had little conversations about it here and there.
So this is a very good question, Raj. There's, off the top of my head, there are three ways. There are probably others. You can do it by grand list, which we know every year what the grand list is. You can do it. It's currently 58-42, town to village. Okay, that's one way. You could do it 50-50. That's pretty simple. You could do it with 3 or 4 variables inside it. You can make it as complicated as you want to make it or as simple as you want to make it. The best way to do it is if you were merged, you would have a capital plan for the entire community with priorities and start checking off your list. But you can make it as difficult as you want to make it, or as simple as you want to make it. And a lot of things of what we do in the village and in the administration is we try to equalize it across the platforms. And so we're not going to be able to answer that until the board gives us direction. We will give you some suggestions when we come together with a plan.
But Evan, you're leaving out a bunch. I mean, we could have arm wrestling. We could do dodgeball. I mean, we could badminton contest. There's all kinds of stuff. You have a giant tug of war. I mean, there's all sorts of things. So let's get creative. Come on.
Finance trivia.
Okay. Finance trivia.
Depending on how this winter goes, we can see who takes out fewer mailboxes with the plow truck on the board.
We give it out every week. We give out $10,000 on Friday if you can answer the right trivia questions. I mean, there's lots of, let's get creative. Come on.
Oh no, I think we should have joint board trivia, and the winner gets the money for that.
All right.
So
oh wait, there's Vince.
Raj,
yes, I have been quiet.
Just so Raj, it was a very good question. Where it devolved from, I'm sorry, but
no, it's just going to come up, you know, and
obviously, yeah, sure.
And I can tell you that, you know, again, depending upon how we view capital, which in my mind includes buildings and properties, not just roads.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're going to need to put together some ideas. Now, it's an agreement between the two communities, and it could change if you need it to change. But in general, it leaves, again, if you were a merged community under one board, that board would decide where those dollars are going on an annual basis. If you are the village and the town outside of the village, not merged, you'll probably put together an MOU and it'll run that way until you change it.
Okay.
Either way, it benefits the communities greatly by letting you get after your capital needs without raising property taxes to do it.
So I don't, and other board members are going to have more questions, but I'm going to just ask you, what's the process, you two, Sarah, Evan, going forward? Like the question Raj just asked, on a serious note, and all the other things. Are you going to be working on this in the background and coming back to us for monthly reports and conference, or what do you envision to have happen here?
I envision us coming back to you at the next joint meeting with a presentation or something like that, Sarah. We have to have this buttoned up, I believe, by the beginning of January to be on the ballot.
Okay. So you get plenty of time.
For the March ballot, and probably early February if it was going to be in the April ballot.
Okay.
And this would operate like any other community vote, right? Where the village voters would vote on it, the town, there'd be a town ballot and a village ballot. And we need to pass them both, or would there just be a townwide ballot one?
I think it's a townwide ballot
one
because it would be raised by the town select board.
But do bear in mind that the annual school meeting of the elections we have presently, that probably gets the biggest turnout in April.
Well, you guys can jointly decide which.
I mean, it gives you an extra month to work on it, so you might want to just keep that in mind.
Now, just to go in the weeds, when Act 60 came into being, Essex was on the list of towns that if it passed this referendum, it does not need state approval. So once it's approved by the voters, it does not go to GovOps or any other state committee. It gets approved as a right.
Great. That's great.
We will have to deal with the Department of Taxation though in getting it up and running. So I don't know if you want to open it up for questions.
No, I'm thinking Vince has a question. Vince looks like he has a question, but maybe not. No. Okay.
Thumbs up. I could see on the shirt.
No, I know he's just got that thumbs up guy there, and I'm thinking he's all good. Okay, all right.
I think that he's all good. I meant to the public if there's any.
Any other board questions? Board member questions? We all good? Okay, so
there's definitely someone whose hand is up, and there's also someone on the phone. So if we want to have Bruce Post go first, and then Marcus Serta is on the phone.
Sounds good.
I'm trying to get unmuted. Hang on.
You're good.
Hello? Okay. I feel like a prohibitionist going to a keg party. There's so much levity about increasing this tax, so let me just throw in a little bit of reality. First of all, what makes you think you can put it on a ballot? In 2009, it was done as a charter amendment because right now the revenue issues and budget issues are decided at town meeting, and it was voted down at town meeting. A subsequent attempt to get it done in the village also went through the annual village meeting. So I think you ought to get some legal advice as to whether you could put this on an Australian ballot. If you can't, then you have to go through town meeting. And that should look interesting in March, mass meeting, depending on the pandemic. One of the things people were very upset about in 2009, I remember being at the town offices, a guy came in, I'm going out of town, I want to vote on that local option tax. And I says, well, you can do it at town meeting. Well, can't I do it by Australian ballot? No, you have to be at town meeting. That town meeting ended up having 500 people come to it on a snowy, cold night. It was 45 minutes late starting because there was such a line to get in. We almost pushed the limit of the high school. I'll show you this letter and I'll send it to, this is the IBM letter that came in about 2 weeks before the ballot. At that time, both the board and the trustees were pushing what George initially said was that it only impacted meals in the cafeteria. And I'll just read you the letter. This came from the IBM site controller. It was put on the consent agenda 2 weeks before the vote. The select board never publicized it, but because it was a public document, I asked for it, got it, and there was a lot of media attention. It said, "Dear Select Board and trustee members, we have reviewed the current proposal for the Essex Junction and Essex Town 1% local option tax, blah, blah, blah. Just to clarify, this tax does not just impact meals sold in the IBM cafeteria. This 1% will be added to all items procured by IBM that are not directly used in manufacturing or development, which are exempt from sales tax. These items include, but are not limited to, all construction materials for changes to office, warehouse, and lab areas, all energy, equipment, and office supplies used in non-manufacturing areas. We do not support this tax as it will increase our operating expenses significantly. All increases in expenses directly impact our ability to be competitive and maintain employment levels." There are a couple small paragraphs. Max Levy was on the board at that time, and he told me, he says, "Well, it's not for attribution, but I've been told that the tax would amount to the high six figures for IBM at that time. I know Global Foundries is less than that, but I'm sure it might have an impact, and that I think Andy works at Global Foundries." One of the issues that was a big issue then was residential energy taxes, and those were, I think, eliminated in 2014. I'm not sure, but there are a host of other things that are involved. So it's not quite as easy. And in terms of splitting the tax, George, you were on the trustees at that time. There was, I don't know if they called it a contract or a memorandum of understanding, that the select board would split the proceeds with the village. Right. And there were legal questions raised as to whether you could even do that. But the tax went down overwhelmingly at town meeting.
Yes.
And a part of the collateral damage was Bob Marcotte, who came in every year trying to reduce the proposed town budget, actually won that night, and there was a $400,000 reduction in the requested town budget as people were having a feeding frenzy. They were so upset with the conduct of the select board at that time, and they felt misled in many areas. The board seemed surprised itself by what was in the tax, and they certainly were surprised by IBM's position. So there you go. That's my experience on it in 2009. By the way, at that time, South Burlington, and another one of the big towns, Williston, already had the local option tax on the books. So There you go.
Okay, Marcus Serta is on the phone. Go ahead, Marcus.
Need to unmute.
All right, I see he's on mute, but all right, hang on. I also just messaged him because he messaged me. Marcus, star number 6 can unmute you. I'm messaging him. All right. Does anyone else have any questions while we're waiting for Marcus to come on?
I think you've got Ken and Irene. I saw, Elaine.
Okay, go ahead, Ken, and I'm going to ask Marcus to try again after you speak.
Hi. I'll just throw in two things for the baby splitting problem, rather than resorting to finance trivia, which sounds pretty torturous. Maybe another zip code would be the solution. You have two
We'll
post
get right
offices.
on that. So,
We have
I'm so
two
sorry.
So it's okay. We have two post offices. Hey, if I can make you laugh, that's a great thing.
I'm sure the federal government will go right along with that.
I just happened to look it up. It's not as hard as you might think. Both post offices have to be called delivery post offices. I don't know. It might be worth looking into. I'm not sure exactly what the details are, but yeah, it's an act of Congress. You're right about that. But it would
That's
literally
not
act an act of Congress. It would solve the
Okay.
problem. Second
It
thing
would
I'd like
solve
to
the
mention is that a sales
Excuse me,
tax.
Ken. Sorry, Patty, we're going to call on you. Don't worry. You can stop waving.
Oh, thank you. I can't see her. I guess that's a good thing. Not distracting. Second item is sales tax is regressive. People that are of lower income end up paying more of their percent income in a sales tax versus people who have more money generally, wealthier people. And property tax is income sensitivity adjusted. So just something to consider. Those are my 2 points. Thanks.
Okay, Marcus, you want to try again? *6 to unmute. And if this doesn't work, I would recommend typing your question in the comments in the chat. Oh, you're on the phone. You can't do that.
Hang up and call back in.
Well, he can address it at our next meeting too. I mean, if he's wanted to send us an email and we can read it at the next meeting where we bring this up, Elaine, too. That's a possibility.
Right. Okay.
I believe I saw Irene Renner had her hand up, but she took it back down, so maybe not. I'm not sure.
Okay. Nope, there it is. Go ahead.
Thank you. I too was on the select board. Actually, I was on the select board. I wouldn't say I too. I think Bruce joined after the last local option tax vote. I was on the select board in 2009, and I will add that not only was the budget hacked by the crowd, who did not like what the chair of the select board did that year, but he in fact lost his seat the next day in the election. There is a lot of passion around this issue, and I would warn you that there may be levity tonight, but if history is not revisited and the reasons are not explored, and none of them have been brought up yet, as to why this failed, it will fail again and heads will once again roll. I'm looking back at my very thick folder of local option tax information, and one village resident at the time pointed out that she can't claim a local option tax the way she could for a property tax rebate. So she called it a hidden tax. She didn't like the idea, and I don't blame her, of being nickel and dime to death. A little on her cable bill, a little on her electric bill, and so forth and so on. I think we need to be very careful and very aware of how this impacts businesses like the global foundries around us. But I think we also have to read carefully through the minutes of that meeting in particular in March of 2009 and study vigorously why that didn't pass, because it is not a no-brainer. Thank you.
Marcus, do you want to try again? One more time?
How is that?
Hey, there you are. Marcus?
Now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Go ahead.
Gee whiz, what a night. Okay. Thank you for being patient with me. So two things, well, I got a couple of things on this. So first off, I just want to say, in having the conversation that we're having right now as a town, not just a village, but as a town about the merger, I think having an options tax discussion right now is poorly timed. The other thing I want to acknowledge, because of that particular discussion, one part of that discussion is about tax equity. Now we're talking about adding a tax on top of our other taxes. Regardless if they're equal or not, now we're adding a tax as well. That's a concern to the whole conversation, and I think it derails the conversation that we're trying to have. The other thing I want to say on this is the fact that if you look at South Burlington, if you look at Williston, if you look at when they took on the options taxes for their cities, they did it with clear guidance and plans about what they were going to move forward for. What I've heard so far is that this will go toward capital projects. It's very general. In the case of Williston, they were looking at taking on all the big box stores, and they were looking at mass development because of that new structure, those new structures and businesses that were coming into their town. South Burlington was taking on a whole new downtown area that they were trying to build and construct to revitalize their city. I'm not hearing specifics in this particular discussion around why we need this options tax. And to be honest, I'm a little disturbed that I heard so many times this evening that, you know what, it's okay because we can do it. Other towns have done it. We can sell this. We don't have to do a tax just because we can sell it. I mean, if we can get away with 1%, believe me, Evan, we could do 20 cents and go for 2%. I mean, the same arguments kind of apply, but I don't think that it's either the right time or the right thing to do unless we have a real direct plan about how these taxes are going to be used so that the residents of Essex, town, village, or otherwise, have a clear understanding of how this is really going to impact them. And to talk about the fact that this is going to impact in a positive way their property tax, again, that's a nebulous conversation because as we all know, it's not just what happens in Essex that impacts our property tax, as our property taxes can be changed because of what happens around us. So I think right now this is poorly timed. This is not well thought out. I would like to see more specifics before I, as a resident, were to vocalize support for it. Right now, I can't vocalize that. I just vocalize some concern because of the fact that this is being brought up at this time. So I'm having the conversation on a regular basis with people all over, and the same conversation is about affordability in the state of Vermont. Affordability, cost of living, and sometimes it's reality, and sometimes it's perception. And right now, to have a conversation about an options tax, whether real or perceived, definitely creates the perception that we are just adding on more taxes onto the everyday people who live here in the town. And I don't think that's a good idea right now. I think we should focus on the conversation for March around merger. Unless somebody gives us something else that really solidifies the reason that this needs to happen. Otherwise, hold this off until the next election cycle.
Okay. Bruce Post and Mary Post.
Call on Patty. She's been waiting and waving her hand.
Please
Okay. See, Patty, I'm sorry. I
Patty.
don't see you
We're not
unless
seeing her.
you raise your hand with your icon. So please go ahead. Patty.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to tag along on what he just said. It was great because I feel my 2 cents are because we don't have a vision, a purpose. We don't have a purpose statement for our town as a whole, like our individual town plans. Like, you know, when I'm talking about the planning commission, we have a plan, and just like Essex Junction has a plan. What have you guys considered researching, or even having our attorney, the village attorney, research an interlocking government? Interlocking means you can have a couple of towns or portions of towns, depending on population. You know, if one has a little bit more population than another, pay their portion in the tax rate, however, you know, having to do with their population. But it's interlocking. Interlocking means they have their own budgets, they have their own separate capital things to do, you know, that they have, you know, all you're talking about the capital plan, and village keeps their capital plans, fix all their sewer problems, the town fixes all their highway problems or whatever. But when it comes to having a a vision that both of us want, then talk about the option tax. I think if we look into what the government's going to be interlocking government. They have it in Maine and in New Hampshire, where the couple of towns are separate, but they work together as one team. And what's our vision as a team here? That's what I want to know.
Okay, Bruce Post, Mary Post.
Geez, you get 100% of the Post household tonight. My goodness. Just a quick correction on what Ken said. The statewide property tax does have an income sensitivity provision. Municipal taxes, I understand, do not. So income sensitivity doesn't apply to the municipal property tax that I'm aware of. Thank you.
Mary Post.
Hi there. I don't have anything really definitive except that when I heard this whole discussion and saw how everybody's so happy and like it's a big festival, I don't see anybody, it seemed to me, caring about the regular little person who's just struggling to make it in Essex, in the Junction or in Essex. And like at one point we said, oh, the problem back then was IBM and Global Foundry. They weren't going to have to take that much off of their bottom line because it's the people that pay. And honestly, I agree with Marcus. I am so thankful he said what he said. And he said it better than I can say it. But I think we should be really, really concerned about affordability in this town. We've talked about wanting to have housing affordability, and yet one of the newest developments going up is I think the houses are all around $500,000. That's affordable for whom? I mean, I'd really like to know. My kids can't even afford to get an apartment in this place. And I think that, you know, like Marcus said, to be adding on another tax, who is actually thinking about and looking out for the people that do not have as much as a lot of us do? And they're just barely making it to pay their rent, to buy food. I think if this passed, all that money should go to our food shelves to help our friends and neighbors that live in our towns. But it's always for new building projects or new this or new that. Let's start taking care of the people. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the public who wishes to speak? Pat, can I ask you to hold off until we find that out? Okay. All right, I don't see any other hands up, and I don't see any comments in the chat, so go ahead, Pat. You're muted.
Thank you. One thing I did want to clarify for people is that I'm hearing where you're coming from about going forward with this. Evan and Sarah have spoken to us and said that they are going to be coming back to us with the specifics of a plan. So I think that those of us who sit on this board are excited because, to be frank, it's very rare that we are able to find and utilize different revenue sources, especially when they have the potential at lowering property taxes that we have to levy on the people in our community. But to say that there's not a plan yet when one hasn't been presented to us and one is forthcoming, I think is a little bit difficult. Right now, what we're asking for in what is being presented to us is, and this was something that came up last year as well, we didn't feel that it was the right time, so we put it off then, and arguably missed out on close to $1 million of possible tax revenue and tax relief that could have gone towards the functioning of this town. What we do need to bear in mind is that this is not a 100% plan. That the details of the plan are coming, that this is the first time talking about this, as we move into what's possibly going to be on the ballot for March. So I think it's just absolutely with respect, I'm hearing what everyone is saying, but, we want to also be clear that we haven't gotten the specifics of a plan yet, but I think it's okay to be excited about hearing this because it's an opportunity that, we should absolutely explore, and we need to do due diligence and hear what that plan is going to be before dismissing it out of hand.
Okay, we have two more members of the public.
You've got Sharon Zukowski and Irene Renner again, I believe, Elaine.
Yes, Sharon, you can go first since we haven't heard from you yet, and then Irene. Sharon, please go ahead.
Okay, you can hear me now, right?
Yes, we can.
I'll be short. When you present this plan, I'm hoping you'll make a not just what you're going to do with the money, but a very clear, maybe easy to understand graph of what the individuals in the community will be taxed on, since it's a destination tax. Like, what will their phone be taxed? Will their internet purchases be taxed? I know that I renovated a building and I had to buy 6 appliances, and I did have it delivered from the Lowe's in South Burlington to Essex, so I wouldn't have to pay that 1%, because for contractors, for small businesses out of the home, 1% really adds up. And the last thing, when you're saying like, oh, it's Starbucks, it's like only going to be 40 cents. Some people, 40 cents is a lot. Like the other day, my neighbor borrowed $2 from me so she could buy baby Tylenol. I mean, those little amounts add up for some people. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Irene.
Thank you. A couple more things, if I may. I just looked up, and Williston has had a local option tax since 2003. So that means that there were 6 years that most Essex residents had an opportunity to shop in Williston and experience what it was like to pay that extra penny. So we may have been in our toddlerhood, but we were not naive. When I sat on the select board in 2009, when this came up last time, I was all for it. I have since revisited my position on it, and I am not for it for a number of reasons. And finally, when I see the incomplete and erroneous information that has been put out about the village merger vote, I shudder to think how this will be pitched to the residents of Essex. Please, oh please, have people from all sides of the issue help you write up whatever you're going to use to communicate so that it is not only accurate, but fair to taxpayers, so that they get a broad picture of the pluses and minuses and that there are not errors and omissions. Thanks.
That's a really good point, because a lot of misinformation gets out there and you can never tell where it's coming from. So the official sources should really be accurate. I'm really happy that our staff does such a great job at being accurate, and we're going to keep doing that. So board members, I have an observation I just want to make. And this is an important aspect of capital in general, and a little history. I believe 2 town meetings ago, the town voters added $100,000 to the town budget for sidewalks. A couple years prior to that, the trustees did a straw poll with the residents at village meeting to say, how do we feel that we have all these projects that we have to do, but we can't get at them? How would you feel about bonding? And the audience was very happy to do that. And that's how the village ended up with a $3.2 million bond. I think that's how much it came out to. And it knocked a bunch of projects off the capital list. So a local option tax is more broad-based, and it is charged to the people who use the infrastructure, and it is not targeted at specific people in the boundaries of the municipality. And so the trucks that drive by on our roads and the people that park in our parking spots, those folks who are patronizing our businesses would also pay that tax. Whereas a bond or adding to the budget for specific capital projects jacks the property tax for the residents of our community. So while on one hand, we are absolutely concerned with affordability, and I heard multiple comments about that, and I understand it completely. At the same time, the other option is that we are taxing ourselves some more by bonding or increasing our capital budget to tackle these projects. The third option is just don't do the projects. So, you know, those are the things that our boards have to really worry about and decide what to do. And in the end, residents lose out when we have an opportunity to possibly bring in additional funding that could help offset that property tax. So I just want to make everyone aware of those ups and downs or the balance there. I'm not 100% sold on this either. I think local option taxes are a very easy to understand way to go if you're targeting the funds that are raised to very specific things. And I heard the comments about, we want to know exactly what this is going to get spent on. And the last time this happened, there was no information for anybody. Like, we're just going to raise the money because we need it. And that's not at all what we're saying here. And we would propose very specific information. But I still have reservations, and I want our boards to talk about it. And I know that the staff has not done any specific modeling for us yet. That's coming. So we are asking for patience on the part of the residents who are asking these questions, because you're right, you haven't gotten the details yet. They're going to come, and we will all see them together at the same time. So thank you. Sorry, George, go ahead.
Elaine, I want to kind of second what you just said. And I can tell you, people who are asking for specific projects, I was on the board when the local option tax was being proposed. And I was on the board several years later when we went out for a bond. And I can tell you exactly what we had, the projects we had in mind. We anticipated getting, at that time, about $350,000 a year from the local option tax. And in 2012, 2013, we were well over, seriously over $1.5 million in our capital project funding. These were roads that had to be fixed. And I know exactly what we were going to spend that local option tax money on. We were going to spend it to fix the roads. And the logic in my mind was that rather than having the cost distributed just on village residents, and only on village residents and on their property taxes, we would share the cost of fixing our roads with the people who commute across our roads and stop at Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's and all the places in the village, just as we do for South Burlington and Williston. And so that was my logic. And I understand there are a lot of different perspectives. There are a lot of different ways of seeing this. And I appreciate the comments, and certainly will take them to heart from all the folks who spoke out from the audience today. But I can assure you, we had very specific projects in mind what we were going to spend the money on. And unfortunately, local residents, it wound up raising their property taxes because we had to take out a bond, and that repayment of that bond got put into their property tax bill. So maybe that's not how everyone wants to see it, but sitting on the board of trustees trying to do the right thing from the village, that's how I saw it.
Mm. Okay, looks like we have one more member of the public, and then perhaps we should move on. Go ahead, Bruce.
Things aren't as straightforward in terms of what the tax would apply to. I looked at an example today. There is something called a bundled purchase. If you buy a $100 raincoat, it wouldn't be taxed. If you buy an umbrella for $20, you would then bundle it with the raincoat, and the whole $120 would be taxed. It's a strange thing. Back in 2009, there were certain types of pickles that were taxed and certain types of pickles that were not. So it's an interesting tax. One of the great things I don't hear, though, is how do we have budget discipline and start dialing back what we're spending? And I say that as a member of the board that voted against 2 of the budgets when I was there. I'm not necessarily a fiscal conservative, but I am fiscally responsible. Thanks.
Okay, everyone. Board members, did you have any additional comments, or shall we move on to the reading file? I'll take that as a move on to the reading file.
Sorry, Elaine, this is Dawn.
Yeah.
They need permission to continue studying this, Sarah and Evan, or not?
This was an informational conversation. There was no action item associated with it, but I think consensus based on the questions is that we need answers. So, board member comments, I definitely have a question for Evan, but I want other board members, do you have any questions or comments?
I just want to give a shout out to Jim Jutras for his publication in the New England Environmental Journal. I thought I was very impressed and he's so very busy, yet in finding the time to write an article. He's a scientist and a scholar at the same time, and we really appreciate his efforts. So I want to really send thanks for him for doing that.
I will second that. We are very lucky to have someone with so much expertise on our staff. Any other board member comments or questions? Evan, can you give us an update on how ballots are coming along?
Yes, I can. As of about 5 o'clock, we have 8,397 general election ballots checked in. Just so you know, they just get checked in. They have not been put through yet. Total voter turnout in 2016 was 11,357. So we are at about 74% of 2016 total voter turnout. And the village merger ballot total checked in so far is 2,607 ballots.
That is fabulous. Evan, please give Susan McNamara Hill and her staff a huge thank you from us. And also Dawn.
From Dawn.
Thank you so much please tell us what you've been up to for the last month.
I'm the person who's alphabetizing every ballot that comes into the building.
Oh my God. You've been busy since the primary.
I have.
All 10,000, almost 11,000 envelopes. Also, interestingly enough, the state of Vermont sent us a envelope opener machine through their CARES Act, which, if you think about it, without that, we would have to hand open 11,000 ballots, then alphabetize them, then check them in, then secure them, et cetera, et cetera. So Susan and her crew have done a great job. For those who are watching, there is a ballot drop box right outside the front door at 81 Main. You can drop your ballot right in there. It is removed the ballots several times during the workday, specifically as well, first thing in the morning, last thing before the end of the workday. And often, if more our staff is in the building, it is secured. There is a security camera on it. So if you go by, please wave. The camera will, not wave back, but it will take your likeness. And so that's a secure place to drop your ballot. Please vote. That's your franchisement. That's part of your voice for your community and your nation. Please vote.
Thanks, Evan. Dawn, do you want to use this time to make any announcements of things that the BCA might need?
At this time, we're on schedule. We're going to begin feeding ballots on Thursday. Thursday, we're going to do District 8-2 as well as their merger ballots. Friday, we'll be doing 8-1, and on Monday, we'll be doing 8-3 and any ballots that come in over the weekend and on Monday.
Okay.
But thank you all, and thanks everybody that's volunteered to help. It's been great.
John, and if people vote in person, correct? The polling places, they do need to bring some form of ID, I believe, or something. Could you explain that?
They need to bring, if they've received a ballot in the mail and they haven't used it, they need to bring it with them. If they come in without it, they'll have to fill out an affidavit.
Right.
Thank you.
But you don't need an ID to vote.
Not here, no.
Right.
Yeah, they just need that. They need the ballot that was sent to them, or they have to fill out the affidavit.
That's correct.
Good.
Okay.
Fingers crossed for good weather, right?
It's going to be a very busy weekend, so thank you in advance, Dawn and Susan, and all the volunteers who will be there at the polls. All right, George, anything else?
No, I'm good. Trustees, any comments, thoughts? Nope.
Select Board, any questions, comments? All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Oh.
Yeah, Elaine, I did have one. Just wanted to mention, or at least extend an offer here, even though I think we both did on social media, that if people had questions about the upcoming merger, that both you and I think Raj had mentioned that he was willing to do the same.
And Andrew.
We'd be happy to meet with people, if it's via Zoom, just remote chat into people's living rooms, so, if anyone has any qualms about needing to stand up and ask questions in a public meeting, it's just an easy way to make people feel comfortable about getting their questions answered. I'll also be inspired by AOC and say that if we have younger members, if they have a video game that they want to play, I will download it. I will play it with them. I will describe the merger while doing that, since she got like 700,000 people watching her play a video game over this last week, as she was trying to get out the vote. So if it works for her, then I'll do it here too.
Did she win?
That's pretty cool.
It was a series of like quick games. So yeah, like I think she lost some and she won some. But.
What was that, Vince?
I said you're a brave man, Pat. Those kids are so good at Fortnite, they trounce me every time.
Yeah, I know I'm setting myself up for losing, but gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, Pat, thank you for remembering to say that. So yeah, Pat and I and Raj and Andrew Brown are happy to Zoom into your living room and answer your questions about merger, and friends, families, and neighbors. You can invite them over in quotes, to listen in and ask your questions. Since going door to door is really not an option in order to remain safe, we would be happy to come to you in a safe way and answer your questions anytime between now and whenever. So thank you. All right, Select Board, if you're interested, we'll take a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
And Dawn is seconding. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? Thank you. Select Board is adjourned.
Trustees, anyone want to make a motion?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Amber second. She beat you, Dan. Any further discussion?
Dan, you're slowing down.
Yeah.
He's sleeping.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 All right, folks. We'll see you next week.
Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Be safe, please.
Good night, everybody.
All right.
Good evening, all.
Good night, everybody.
All right.
Good evening, all.